media is being, disintermediated.
Yeah.
Because now, candidates for president can just speak directly to people through platforms like Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, the amazing thing about Twitter and things like Spaces are that, although I happen to be hosting it, I had to switch over to David hosting it because my account was actually...
There's too much interest. But...
my account was breaking the system. But there's really never been a mechanism before where someone could address the nation, or anyone who wanted to listen to them could, from anywhere in the world.
I know. AOC gave a shout out.
Anywhere.
I said, let's run it back. I replied to her and said, let's run it back.
Really profound change.
Juice it.
And it's also like it's not just whether the media reports something, an article is true or not. Even more powerful is deciding what the narrative is. And
totally.
so, it's just like, if there's only so much you can actually fit in a newspaper or a magazine.
Juice it.
And there's only one thing you can really put on the cover of a magazine. So that whoever's deciding that is deciding to not talk about other things. Whereas with a public digital town square like we have here,
bro, they're glazing Twitter Spaces more than they're glazing DeSantis. This is so awesome.
Instead of
when Twitter Spaces has demonstrably been a failure,
which I don't recognize the irony of me using that phrase. But
what are you saying right now?
It's true, and you judge by the results that this is a means for the people to decide the narrative, and for the people to decide which way a debate will go. Not sort of 5 editors-in-chiefs of a few newspapers, basically.
Yeah, and I think one of the really crazy things that happened during COVID is that social networks really started censoring dissenting viewpoints on COVID, medical viewpoints that ended up being totally correct in lockstep with what the mainstream media was doing. So basically, big tech platforms were undermining their main reason for existing, which is giving people a choice. And actually, there's somebody who I think knows more about that than any of us, which is Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who's a professor of medicine at Stanford. I want to pull him in here. Jay, you go ahead and unmute yourself if you can. It'd be great to hear from you. I know that during COVID, you worked with Governor DeSantis. It'd be great just to hear a little bit about your interactions and if you have a question for the governor.
Yeah, thank you, David. Yeah, I mean, it was an absolute honor to work with Governor DeSantis, and I was really impressed by his decision making in the face of an absolute firestorm of criticism.
AOC replied,
but he, Governor, you did the right thing when you opened the schools. And my kids in California for a year and a half.
We found something good to come out of all this. Let's
go! Whereas Florida kids were in school. And you can see it in the results, and the learning loss numbers are so much better in Florida. I'm really curious, Governor, as you're running for president, what are your thoughts about reforming, the public health authority in the United States and the federal government, the CDC, the FDA, the NIH? How do you see the reforms we need so that the mistakes of the lockdowns that happened during the pandemic don't happen again when there's another pandemic?
Well, first, we need an honest reckoning about what happened during COVID. And the only honest reckoning is that all of those agencies, all of the elites, the public health establishment, they failed. They instituted bad
society
policies.
has moved beyond COVID.
Obviously, it's a novel virus.
Constantly talking about how good you were during lockdowns is only going to win the governorship.
That the path
That's it.
was wrong.
That's as far as it goes,
they
bitch.
Doubled down and wanted to do it even more. And I really believe had Florida not just kind of stood in the way, I think this country would have had rolling lockdowns for probably a 2-year period. And so their impulses were authoritarian. They were not following the data. And I think the U.S. government needs to acknowledge the failures. And I think all of those agencies need to be cleaned out. What I saw just dealing with them was I saw a interest in the narrative and in politics over evidence-based reasoning and evidence-based medicine.
Millions of people died, but like the American psyche has moved beyond COVID.
And I think you need major overhaul.
The only people who still talk about COVID are people who are either pro-maskers, who understandably, disability advocates and whatnot.
With that,
Or
I mean, I
the
think
people who are
the,
anti-maskers who think about like the
other
good
thing that
old
I
days
saw
and how
during
far
the
they got
pandemic,
fucked
Governor,
over.
you was
And that
subject
is
to it just
in
as
the
much as
edges
I
of
was
society.
when we were
The
talking
broad
about
majority
COVID.
does not care.
YouTube censored a video of us
Bringing that back is not a viable campaign strategy
on COVID policy. There's so much of the federal government infrastructure went
especially
into
for the broad majority. They don't want to think about COVID
during the pandemic. So it's not just public health agencies, but other agencies inside the federal government that worked to suppress the speech of Americans. And I'd love to hear
That's
your
hilarious.
No question. So
copium started.
The danger there. So I'm actually going to be signing a digital bill of rights for Florida pretty soon, which will bar all state and local government officials from colluding or working with a technology company for the purpose of censorship of speech. Because you're exactly right. You had people in the White House, you had people in all these other agencies working with these platforms to try to take it down. And oh, by the way, what did they censor Dr. Bhattacharya for? It was a roundtable discussion that I led and convened. We had Dr. Bhattacharya, MD, PhD from Stanford. We had Martin Kulldorff from Harvard Medical School, and we had Sunetra Gupta from Oxford, who was generally viewed as one of the best epidemiologists across the pond until she became anti-lockdown. So these are all eminent people.
This is pretty funny.
We're discussing whether there's any scientific
Trump
basis
did that.
to force a school child to wear a mask for 8 hours a day. They all agreed there was no basis to do it and that you should not have school mask mandates. YouTube thought that that was, quote, anti-science and that should be taken down. But even at that point, we had already had enough experience in Florida where you had some schools that had done it before the state banned the mandates.
This is so stupid, like a digital bill of rights. Yeah, well, how about you ask Elon about the digital bill of rights, about what he did with Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
Huge problem. And yes, I think the federal government, FBI,
they don't give a fuck about collaborating with governments.
Any of the health agencies, it's unconstitutional for them to be delegating speech restriction to a private company. You can't do indirectly what the Constitution would clearly forbid you to do directly.
Let me pull in. We have Congressman Thomas Massie.
Hassan Piker.
You're there. Go ahead and unmute yourself. I mean, what we're talking about here is, I think, really unconstitutional actions by federal agencies. Congressman Massie, I know that you've been involved in this problem of government agencies being weaponized and used against the American people in an inappropriate way. Do you have a comment on this? And do you have a question for Governor DeSantis?
Well, first of all, let me say a big thank you to Elon Musk for buying Twitter and exposing all of this. On our weaponization committee, we wouldn't know so much of it if he hadn't done this, almost as a public service to the First Amendment. It's a disturbing trend. Government, as the governor said, the government is colluding with big corporations. We found out this week from an FBI.
Bro, they're riding Elon harder than DeSantis right now.
Voluntarily gave names of and information on.
They're doing tricks on it, dude.
In Washington D.C. from January 5th.
They're doing tricks on it.
Overlaid that with gun purchases that they had on record anywhere in the country for any period of time, and just they say they voluntarily gave that to the FBI. So that's disturbing to me. By the way, I've never met Elon Musk, but I'm one of your biggest fans. I'm the first congressman to have a Tesla. I'm on Starlink, and I would have bought a Powerwall, but I'm off the grid, and you wouldn't sell me one, so I had to make one with a wrecked Model S, and it's been running our house for 5 years. But my
and just for the record,
Elon, do a Nintendo. Drone strike his house, bro.
Our first year as
he bricked your fucking shit.
But his license plate is Kentucky Coal.
The dick went all the way through.
Would have that in the country.
Bro,
thanks for
I know now why they actually went with the audio only.
Governor DeSantis, my question.
I know now why they did that. So you can't see them sucking each other's cocks.
With me, and why is it that Congress is so feckless at reining in these government agencies, and what do you think we need to do? And if you were president, what would you urge Congress, or what bills would you like to see and sign to rein in this, sort of overreach of government bureaucracy?
Well, first, I think there's a lot that the executive branch can do, and all I will say when it comes
spinning
to
on the dick like he's a Costco chicken, goddamn.
But buckle up when I get in there, because the status quo is not acceptable, and we are going to make sure that we reconstitutionalize this government. And these agencies are totally out of control. There's no accountability, and we are going to bring that in a very big way. Now, part of the reason it's gotten so bad, power's been consolidated and effectively a fourth branch of government, because Congress hasn't used its two main powers that it has under the Constitution. First, the power of the purse. If an agency is engaging in conduct that is outside the realm of what is legal, or you think it's not good for the public interest, then you can remove the funding for those operations. There's nothing that they're not entitled to get the same level of funding every year, and yet Congress runs the government on autopilot, either continuing resolutions or massive omnibus spending bills. So these agencies are all bulletproof. They know that they're going to end up getting something similar or more every single year, and it creates an incentive for them to abuse their power. The other thing you can do is actually legislate, so you're not delegating to the bureaucracy key issues regarding how to enforce federal law. You should define what you want.
I don't think he realizes that
implementing.
Getting into the weeds of policy is never going to be good
invitation for the bureaucracy to make really important,
because there's always way more policy driven nerds than you that are going to rip it apart, and it's not even fun for the broader majority.
Do things that are going to transform our society or our country. That is
Elizabeth Warren is the greatest example I can think of.
So would you sign the REINS Act? We passed it out of Judiciary today.
Oh, yeah. No, of course. Yeah, that's a no-brainer. That would, I think, be a great check for that. I also think that we're going to have a good chance to see some of this Chevron deference really curtailed, or maybe even eliminated based on the U.S.
Sauger is right.
Upcoming jurisprudence. And I think that's another reason why the bureaucracy has become so powerful, because courts have basically been told they can pretty much do what they want, and courts are supposed to just defer. I don't think that that's actually correct. I think the courts, they have to make a judgment about what does the law actually say, and you can't
disaster
to quote unquote experts in the bureaucratcy.
Thank you.
Oh, it's back. We're back.
Right,
we're so back. We're so back, baby. Disaster. I didn't even think of that.
They blamed you for canceling
Ron Disaster.
For $1 billion investment in Florida. Said they were canceling 2,000 jobs. I saw other reports that suggested Disney was going to make the cuts anyway, and due to a larger, budget cutting initiative. Regardless of why they did it, why do you feel your fight with Disney remains important, considering you already beat them on the parental rights bill that they opposed? And what would you say to some of your opponents in this race who argue that the fight has dragged on too long?
The dumbest thing he could have done is also go against Murdoch.
Protection of children. We believe jamming gender ideology in elementary school is wrong. Disney obviously supported injecting gender ideology in elementary school. They did oppose our parents' rights legislation. And the fact is, when they opposed it, that was a big deal, because for 50
Tweeted David
years,
Sachs to let you speak. Yeah, he's not
Disney
doing that. Let's
wanted
be real.
In Florida politics, they pretty much got it. But not this time. I signed the bill. We did, as you say, win on the issue. But what happened was Disney's posturing, some of the other statements that their executives were making, kind of the corporate culture, had really been outed as trying to inject matters of sex into the programming for the youth. And I think a lot of parents, including me, look at that and say, that's not appropriate. I mean, we want our kids to be able to just be kids, and that's kind of our mantra. So you had this setup that Disney engineered many decades ago, where they actually had their own government that they controlled with no accountability. They were exempt from the laws that all their competitors had to follow, massive tax breaks, and they even racked up municipal debt. And Florida basically put them on a pedestal many decades ago and joined the state with this one company at the hip. We just didn't feel that we were comfortable maintaining that relationship. And
so boring, dude.
Their
boring
status. So Disney has to live under the same laws as everybody. They got to pay the same taxes as everybody, and obviously they'll be responsible for those debts. So the reason why there's a quote fight is just because they filed a lawsuit against the state of Florida.
We're rocking with Trump. Boring. We're voting for Trump in the Republican primaries.
But I don't think that that's good policy. And I think some of these Republicans that are taking Disney's side, they're basically showing themselves to be corporatists, because these are all corporate goodies. This is not the way you would run a competitive economy, and the arrangement had really outlived its usefulness, but it persisted because Disney was so politically powerful. I think the company's ethos have changed in a way that's alienated a lot of people in our legislature and in Florida, and so there was really no justification to keep it. But
do I think little Rhonda has a chance of beading Trump in the primaries? No, he never did, and he certainly has solidified that he won't now. The problem is, like, it's so stupid that it makes me feel like maybe his goal is to just like assume that Trump goes to prison.
I think that they should withdraw the lawsuit, but obviously we're going to defend our actions because we think we have the right to do what we did.
Because, like, who is he triangulating for here? It makes no sense.
Used to criticize Republicans for being in the pocket of big corporations, and now they're attacking you because you're not.
Well, not only that, David, it's interesting because the media in Florida for years had hammered Disney, and they would point out like that this was not a good arrangement because, you know, Disney was not accountable to anyone. I mean, when the state control board took over this district, the firefighters came to the board and they said, hey, we weren't getting survivor benefits for some of these widows. And so the state control board actually paid out some of the benefits that they were getting stiffed on. There were a lot of people in Central Florida who were really thankful that there was some accountability being brought to bear because, I mean, you know, it's human nature. If there's no accountability over any individual or entity, of course, they're going to behave differently than if you have normal accountability. But the media was always very hostile to that. But just because I happen to be involved in bringing it back to reality and making sure that they were under the same laws, well, then all of a sudden they're running to Disney's defense. I mean, are you kidding me? And oh, by the way, on this project, you know, they had announced this many years ago. They had not done anything for it, but that is actually not
also bonus points for Elon's mic being louder than Rhonda's.
So none of the issues that are involved in their suit would have made a difference there. Obviously, as a publicly traded corporation, you know, they have a fiduciary duty to do what's best for their shareholders. So I'm assuming if they were in better financial shape and they saw the project as lucrative, they would have gone forward with it. But I think clearly they've had some problems with their stock price and a lot of other issues. And I'd also just finally point out,
Elon is not catching Tracer because he has a bunch of dick riders.
More money than me because they were open during COVID and they were closed in California. And that went on for many, many months where literally I had all the theme parks.
I'm going to take her out real quick.
Opened in 2020. People are going. It's safe. They're having fun. And the California parks were closed. I think they were closed for over a year out in California. So we were, I think, a much better place to be doing business, certainly since I've been governor.
Great. Let me shift gears here to the topic of education. I want to pull Chris Rufo into the conversation. I know he worked with you on some initiatives. I think, you know, one other thing that the mainstream media has, I think, bashed on is they've kind of started promoting this narrative that you want to ban books from school libraries. You refuse to teach kids about slavery or other unpleasant realities of American history, or pretend that gay people don't exist. Since many people, I think, in this room, we're now up to, wow, over 271,000 people. So this is, I think, totally unprecedented in terms of the numbers of people we have participating. By the way, I think Twitter is working much better now. I think it crashed because when you multiply 500,000 people in a room by an account with over 100 million followers, which is Elon's account, I think that created just a scalability level that was unprecedented. But with my meager followership, it seems to be working much better.
It's we have some scaling issues specifically related to my account. At one point in January, if I tweeted above a certain size, it would crash the servers. And then anyone else who was tweeting at the same time would lose their tweet as well.
So in any event, well, we're breaking new ground here.
Oh yeah, totally, dude. Radio was invented in 1899. Okay, shut the fuck up, breaking new ground here, dude. All the fucking Elon dick riders are so pissed off at me on fucking Twitter because of the radio tweet that I had. It's hilarious, dude.
Of the matter for people who maybe have never heard from you before, and then I want to pull Chris Rufo in on this as well.
Damn, this guy's good.